Hi everyone, Dave here, East Rosebud Fly Tackle in Billings, Montana. Welcome. Been a hot summer here. Don't know where it's been where you're at, but we're looking for a little change. Today I'm going to tie a PMD cripple. It's a Quigley style cripple. To me, it's probably the most elegant cripple emerger style out there. There are a lot of them, from simple to overly complex, but the Quigley is a really nice looking fly. Of course, the pale morning duns are a predictable summertime hatch here in Montana just about every day, around 10 o'clock or so in the morning until 1, very much like the tricos are. There's actually two different species in the pale morning dun, so you'll see a change in size. Early on, the hatch will be a size 14. And then as that one species in frequence dies off, a second species, enormous, which is a size smaller, comes on. So it looks like one hatch, but it's actually just an extended hatch of two very similar species. It's very common on tailwaters like the Bighorn, on spring creeks. They are crawler type mayflies, so they prefer small gravel and more gentle type of runs. And possibly it's the time of the year, high heat, low humidity, but the cripple and stillborn rate is about 50% with pale morning duns, which is extremely high. So an emerger pattern is definitely one you want to have on board when you're fishing the PMD. So here's what I'm going to tie for you, the PMD Quigley Cripple. The two sizes that you'll want is the size 14, which is in the vise here, and a size 16 for the later hatch. I actually have two different bodies on these flies. The fly in the vise has a normal pheasant tail. This one has an olive pheasant tail. And it's nice to have both colors. I'm going to be using UTC 70 yellow for the thread so that I don't cut the hair when I put pressure on it. The rib is small golden olive wire. For the tail, I'm using two different things. I'm using some PMD pale morning dun, prime marabou. I'm going to be taking a few strands off here. And the secondary tail is sparkle emerger yarn in amber. The body, like I said, just regular pheasant tail. You want to make sure you get flues that are long enough that you can cover the hook. And speaking of the hook, this is one I haven't worked with before. I've tied these emergers on a variety of hooks, including the Daiichi 1160. This is from Gamakatsu. It's got a funny shape to it, but it's actually perfect for this fly. It gives you a definite place to stop for your abdomen, which helps to eliminate crowding the head, as you'll see. So, and a little bit of dubbing for the Thorax, UV2 fine and dry, just a chocolate brown, dark brown dubbing. Because remember, although this fly looks big for a size 14, you're imitating two stages of the same insect. The bottom part is the actual nymph coming from the surface. This is its abdomen, and the thorax, the dark brown. The tail is also the nymph and the emerger. And the wing butts back here are the wings that are still trying to emerge. And of course, then you have this disarray of wings trying to come out of the shuck. Well, that's the reason why the fly looks as big as it does. This is the Gamakatsu C15BV. As you can see, it's got a vertical eye to it and this bend. And this is an excellent spot to stop your abdomen so that you have enough room for your thorax and the hackle. I'm going to start this thread right at the eye. Go ahead and lay a thread base. And then when I get to this, I'm going to start the bipart tail. First of all is this amber sparkle emerger yarn. Anytime you're using a shuck, keep it sparse. You're trying to imitate something that's almost invisible, so you don't need a big hank of things on there. This is just a little partial of the yarn itself. A couple of light wraps here. We'll pull that down a little. And go ahead and wrap. Make sure you leave enough hook gap there for the fish. Trim that tag off. And make this about a shank length long. And also to give this some movement, I said this is some pale yellow prime marabou. I'm just going to take off about 10 or 12 of the actual hurls. I intentionally tie them in long, again with a couple of soft wraps. And then by putting a little tension on the thread, you can adjust that. And then I'll nick those tips to even them up. Go ahead and tie this down. Same place as the emerger yarn. I'll also be showing you how to tie off counter-wrapped wire. If you've ever counter-wrapped wire before, you know that it can be a pain to get tight because you're wrapping against it and it wants to loosen up as you're trying to tighten it. And I'll show you a way to avoid that. If I can find my wire. So this is going to be a counter-wrapped wire to help to support that coming pheasant tail. So to do that, tie it on my side of the hook shank. A good way to start a stiff material like this, I think Charlie Craven calls it the 90-90-90. Your thread is one axis, the hook is the other axis, your wire is the Z-axis. Simply put it in right there at that corner and start it with the thread. No mess, no fuss. And make sure you bring that all the way down to the tail itself. Okay, for the body, the abdomen, use about 6 or 8 flues of good long pheasant tail. This is just your regular color. Olive is also another good color. Trim just a little bit off the tips. Be careful with the pressure on the thread as you use these smaller materials. You can easily cut them off. So the abdomen is going to stop right where the hook bend was. But if for enable me to wrap this, I'm just going to move this thread towards the eye to get it out of the way temporarily. Now you'll have to excuse my fingers. The best way to wrap multiple pieces like this, whether it's pheasant tail or peacock, is to control it. If you don't, it's like herding cats. So you keep your finger close to the hook, and as you wrap it, you make sure you keep it flat. Pinch it with your thumb, bring it around, pinch it with your finger, same thing. Okay, there's no really good way to show that with my fingers out of the way, but that is how you control that material. And we're going to bring it right up to that bend, like that. I'll bring my thread back. And 3 wraps. I'd like to get 1 wrap underneath as a buffer before I tighten, and then a couple of thread wraps on top. And we'll get rid of this. Okay, to counter wrap the wire, you first bring it towards you, then underneath. Try to keep your sections fairly even. Can widen them as you approach the head of the fly, that's normal. Okay, so I'm over where my thread is right now. If I try to tighten it by simply wrapping my thread over, it's going to push the wire away from me. Take 1 turn around the thread, tighten it, come around. Now I'm going to take 3 wraps of wire around the thread. Bring both up and tighten, and boom. The wire breaks off and your thread has it on where you want it. Very secure, very easy way to do that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead. I think I lost my thread there. Come back here. A little bit of brown dubbing. Simulate the thorax. Doesn't take very much. Some of the Quigley Cripple variations will use a strand of peacock here. That's also very nice looking. It's just that it gets hidden by the hair and the hackle. So dubbing also works. and it's easier to find. So I'm going to come back over, cover those thread wraps up, and end up right there. Oh, for the hair, I'm using some all-purpose hair. Spinning hair would also work. You need something that's fairly fine, got good even tips on it. Just about, I think, a dozen hairs or so. You don't want to overdo it. Make sure you clean and stack them. Get all the fuzzies out, or as much as you can. The fuzzies just impede hair movement, which means the hair doesn't stack well. All right, in the stacker. Nice even tips on there. We want the extended part of the wing to be about hook shank in length. Pinch it here. Make a couple of soft wraps, one on top of the other, pinch wraps, and then tighten it. Be careful initially because this thread can cut the hair, even though it's a flat thread. And wrap a small band. Tighten as you go. This is a place where we'll set the hackle. It's also a good delineation between the hair tips and the butts. And then trim the butts off here. This is supposed to simulate the portion of the wing that's still trying to get out of that shuck. For hackle, I'm using some Grizzly dyed pale yellow saddle from Whiting. Prepare that as usual. Make sure that the portion of the hackle that first encounters the hook is bare. That will help to keep the hair or the hackle from flaring backwards. I'm going to tie that in right where that band is. Make sure you have enough bare quill that when you tie it in, it will go almost to the eye of the hook, because we're going to tie it in here and pull the hair forward and tie behind the hook eye. That way it's nice and secure. A few tight wraps here. Bring your hair up, make sure you can see the quill. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'll try to expose it. It's right here underneath the shank. So grab that, a couple of tight wraps right up to the eye. And then I'm going to make a couple of wraps here at my band of thread. And this is size 14 hackle for the size 14 hook. Bring the hair up, bring your first wrap snug against that wing, and a couple more wraps. Now to tie off dry fly hackle, you want to make sure that the thread is directly underneath the hackle, okay? If you try to pull the thread over to the hackle, you're going to be pushing hackle everywhere. This way the thread is directly underneath the hackle. One loose wrap. Go ahead and bring the hackle away from you and towards you. This exposes the hackle and allows the thread to slip right down to the quill itself. Now you can tighten that. A couple more wraps. And if you've done it correctly, you see that you have a nice flat, again, excuse my fingers, a nice flat face to your hackle. Very few hackles sticking out over it. A couple of more thread wraps to make sure that's secure, and then flip it. Like I say, I think it's an elegant fly. I think it's one of the best looking emerger patterns, and it can be tied for any mayfly of any size just by varying the size of the hook, the color of the abdomen, the height of the wing. And then a little bit of head cement there. And try to keep it out of the eye. Make sure you use very, very little. I prefer just kind of a damp bodkin. And I put it on the side of the hook behind the eye. That helps to keep it out of the eye. If you do happen to get some in the hook eye, just use your piece of hackle, put it in the eye. The hackle will remove the head cement, but it won't stick to it. So there's the Quigley Cripple and PMD. Like I say, it's a different hook. I really can't tell you if this vertical eye has any particular purpose or if it makes the fly sit any differently on the water, but I do like the looks of it nonetheless. So thanks for joining in, and we'll see you next time.